I come from a world like HashiCorp where we benefited from the community contributing back to the technology. It has helped the entire community become better. It helped accelerate the cloud adoption, which has had a lot of positives. And I believe the same thing for AI. And a lot of the folks that I speak to in the AI space are very similar in their assumption that if we all work together, we can make sure AI is responsibly used and can help humanity in many ways, right? And can avoid some of the problems that we could have.
Welcome to another edition of Cloud Unfiltered. I am your host, Michael Chenetz, and today I have Amith from Clarifai. Is that how you pronounce it, by the way, Clarifai?
It is correct. Clarifai.
Okay, sounds great. So I am really immersed in this world of AI. I know that you recently joined Clarifai, so tell us a little bit about yourself and how you kind of got there.
Yeah, so I joined, as you said, I joined Clarifai very recently as president and chief operating officer. Setting our not exactly changing what we are doing, but getting us more operational in terms of how we go to market, how we think about customers' challenges, how we solve problems for customers. And as you all know, AI is a hot topic these days, and there's an opportunity to actually go in and help customers do it correct. And Clarifai is a 10-year-old startup, so it's not one of those that just popped up overnight. It's been around for 10 years. The founder, Matt Zeeler, actually won Vision at 10, 12 years ago. In fact, he won, I think, 4 or 5 categories at the same time. And that was essentially the beginnings of Clarifai. And for the past 10 years, we've been hyper focused on public sector customers, the US Army, Navy, Air Force, and so on. Some of those customers use Clarifai as the base of their AI solutions. How I reached here, prior to Clarifai, I was at a company called Cohesity. I was running
Mhm.
the cloud business unit there. So a lot of the cloud innovations there happened under my watch and with a lot of other folks, obviously. And prior to that, I was at an open source startup called HashiCorp. I was an early employee at HashiCorp. So anyone who's followed the DevOps path and has gone through that transition has either used a Terraform or a Vault or a Console or a Nomad or a Vagrant or a Packer, and you're familiar with the set of tools that HashiCorp provides as an open source solution. And prior to that, I spent about 10 years at Microsoft with 2 startups in between as well. So primarily focused on product management and product marketing. Most of my time used to be an engineer very early on, and translated that into hopefully something that would get me more in front of customers and try to solve customer challenges. Why I picked the Clarifai role in essence was because if you rewind maybe 10 years ago, right? If you look at the cloud market, 2017, 2018, everybody was trying to attach the cloud tag next to their product or trying to find a cloud job. And why the reason I picked HashiCorp at the time was because HashiCorp was not trying to build a cloud application. They were trying to help enable cloud. They were trying to help developers build what they were looking for in terms of what their cloud applications would be versus compete with them, right? And today it's the same thing on the AI front. Everyone's trying to attach an AI tag next to their name, next to their product. I think my trash can is AI enabled at this point. And everyone's trying to find an AI job. And really, what drove me was the parallels to HashiCorp for Clarifai. Clarifai is not trying to build an AI application, it's trying to enable developers to get to an AI application and operationalize it really fast. And it provides a platform that enables any developer to do that or any enterprise to do that. So that was essentially the excitement around seeing that parallel play out after many years on the cloud side is essentially what drew me to Clarifai.
Yeah, so a little note is I was on the team for Intersight when I was working for Intersight at Cisco we were the first to onboard ITS, which is Intersight Terraform service, and HashiCorp Terraform. So I was responsible for a lot of that
Okay.
integration on that side. So I know where you're coming from. But going back to what you were saying, it's funny the parallels that I see in well, I come from a cloud native background too. Well, and actually networking way back and security and stuff like that. But uh, you know, looking at the parallels, it's very similar. There was like this big rush to get to the cloud, and everybody had to be cloud first. And now there's this huge rush to be almost AI first, and it's every as you say, you have to take things with a grain of salt. There's a lot of architecture out there where people are saying, "Hey, this is AI," but really, no, you're just kind of connecting to AI, and it's giving you not something that I would consider real value. And that's why I really love what you just said. I think that's amazing that you know, that you're seeing that parallel there, and you're kind of going down that path, because I think there's a real need there. I think it's tremendous need.
Absolutely, there's noise and there's confusion, right?
Hmm.
I mean, what we kind of jokingly said at the beginning, there's so many AI startups popping up every day, and every one of those have real reasons because they're trying to solve a different problem that comes up today that might not have been a problem yesterday. Um, and so that confusion also adds more noise, and it also adds a lot more chaos. Today, when I talk to a lot of folks who think they know AI, it's mostly centered around models. The belief is that if you have an open AI or any other AI model out there, you've got AI covered. Honestly,
Yeah,
that's not true, right? And anyone who actually tries to deploy an AI application will tell you that model is just part of the story. Models are
yeah.
just part of the story. You have lots more that needs to happen under the covers, whether it's your compute layer, your security layer, all of those need to play together. What data source you're using, how do you ingest that data, all of that have to play in conjunction with each other before the models are actually usable to something that you really need to create, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because, as I was telling you pre-show, is that I have a lot of friends, obviously, probably everybody does right now, that are trying to do things in AI. And, because of my technical background, I get pulled into things, because I've advised for companies and things like that. And one of the things that, as I started to really dig into I realized that for some of the things that we wanted to do, which was we wanted to match a picture and see if we could match similar styles and see if we can figure out, um, if that matches somebody's likes. Well, to do all these things, you have to figure out, first of all, how embeddings work
Mhm.
and how translations work. And usually you have to use tools in Python with things like LangChain or Haystack or one of these other things that you kind of stitch all these components together. And you realize that, and by the way, you have to understand prompting the right way. You have to understand, you have to understand vector databases and all these other things that you kind of have to put together. It's almost like when Kubernetes came out, people were like, we're just going to go cloud first. And in the Kubernetes world, you got to know, okay, well, I heard of this thing called Kubernetes. I'm going to try that. What's the CSI? What's the CNI? What are all these components? And by the way, there's a landscape of about 5,000 different solutions. It's the same thing that's happening now. So there's this need for simplification. And I think now, just full disclosure, I did look at your application and your solution, pre-call for about an hour. And, so I haven't had a lot of time, but I feel like it answers some of the questions around, like, how can you do this a little bit easier?
It absolutely does, and it was the intent behind the platform was to help the individual developer build out AI applications as fast as they need to, right? And it was very similar to what HashiCorp. I don't want to bring HashiCorp into this discussion again and again, but that was the initial intent behind HashiCorp as well. From a developer perspective, how do you help a developer build their first application really fast and really quick? So, and this happened organically because we were working with the public sector customers over the last 10 years. And AI was not as prevalent as it is today, or at least the terminology was not as prevalent as it is today. In order to get the right outcome and the output, we had to build a lot of things. We had to create feature capabilities around auto scaling, auto ingestion, building large vision models of our own, computer vision models of our own, but also ingest models from other places because the government works with different contractors and you need to be able to take those in, ingest it. But then once you ingest those, how do you fine tune those models? How do you vectorize it with the right vector database? How do you orchestrate it? So all of those became organically built into the platform, even though we didn't realize we were building out a full-fledged end-to-end platform. And so what that meant is today, when a developer walks into our platform, there are 400,000 developers who are active on our platform today. They can go in, start using it day one. They can utilize any model that's available, and we actually ingest models from OpenAI to Hugging Face. plus we have our own models. We also have something called a leaderboard. So based on your use case, we actually have ratings on which models work and which ones are ranked higher than the others. And you'll find every type of model you need. But beyond just understanding the model that you need, it's also about the linearity, the synthesis of that model to the fine tuning and the pre-training and all of that stuff, right? So as you said, your friends, if they're starting a startup, rather than rebuild all of that, let's focus on getting the right outcome in terms of what you're trying to do as a startup, right? uh, if you're trying to build an AI chatbot, why would you need to reinvent the wheel in building all of this? The other great thing about the platform is it's completely API based. So if you wanted to use a vector database that's not our own, and you've already paid for, or you have another vector database, you can plug it in. So so I think that's the beauty of that whole platform, is the fact that you can walk in day one and walk out in a few minutes with an active AI application. Or if you wanted to play around with it and adjust it the way you want, you can do that too. The flexibility is right there.
Yeah, I mean, when you're creating these applications, a lot of times AI is a component of that application. So you don't necessarily have the developer resources, and honestly, AI people that are skilled in that are harder to come by and usually more expensive. So having the capability to build out this kind of engine that you need is a really good thing, because it takes the onus off of having to play around with all those open source and closed source Python components and things like that.
Yeah, and it also does not lock you in, right? I mean, the beauty of the platform is, we like to say, we are a platform where you can use any model, any data, and deploy anywhere, right? It could be on prem, it could be on cloud, it could be in a VPC in a cloud of your choice. So it's up to you. But the other thing, from a model flexibility perspective, and we have active customers today who are running into this, they overinvest in one model, and then they realize that there are better models out there for them, whether it's open source or closed source models, and they would like to pick and choose and create workflows around what works best for them. And that has cost implications as well as it has quality implications, right? And so the moment we show them our platform and show them the workflow orchestration that we have embedded into the solution, whereby you can pick and choose models and create a workflow that optimizes the right model for your outcome and the use case, it's a very revealing insight for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I do see people going more towards that multi-model kind of approach. It's funny, out of laziness for this show, for Cloud Unfiltered, I wrote a Go application that will automatically translate the video to audio, and then uses OpenAI's Whisper, which is a locally run transcribing kind of model.
Yeah.
And then I use OpenAI GPT-4o to actually get like the YouTube descriptions. But I just do this. It'll automatically throw my file into a folder. It looks at that folder and it will automatically do all these things for me. So it's made my process a lot better. But I do use two different models because, hey, I don't want to have to pay to transcribe my stuff, then that would cost more money. So now it's half the price because I use a local model for one thing, using Olama, and I use a remote model just for the one little piece that I need, which doesn't cost much at all.
Yeah. No, that's, you described a scenario that's very common, right, for a lot of developers and also for enterprises. We have a bunch of startups that actually use our platform, as you said, like your friends would like to do, to build their actual business case. There's one that currently works in the retail space in identifying the right retail product for you when you're in store. So they build an entire retail end user experience on our platform, but it's branded something different. Under the covers, it's Clarifai. So there are all these applications and use cases that needs multimodal, and in some cases, actually not even large language models. It's small language models or medium language models, SLMs and MLMs. So those are starting to get more prevalent. The right data set needs to be used as well. It might not be OpenAI, and the internet is not your data source. For enterprises, it's more closed source, and the data is more restrictive. So there's all these security and privacy issues that are also forcing people to think outside of LLMs and OpenAI and ChatGPT and so on. OpenAI and ChatGPT has done a fabulous thing for the AI market and the industry in general, but it's also created these set of expectations, maybe that are not real at times, because sometimes when we talk to customers, especially and depending on who the customer is, within a customer, some requests that we get are with business units or business groups. So, for example, marketing will come in and say, we want you to create a automated AI model around digital asset management. So look at 15 years of our data and look at our brand sourcing and build out marketing materials. We can do that for sure. But then there are other groups, let's say manufacturing, that'll come in and say, we need you to be able to detect defects in our manufacturing cycle. Now, that requires a little bit of model arrangements and model customization and model fine tuning and so on. But because of ChatGPT and OpenAI, sometimes the expectation is it's out of the box. You just turn this on and it just works, right? That's far from the truth, though. So I think there's a little bit of a learning curve that we have to educate people on what is the reality from an AI perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you think about it and you just look at the internet, okay, look at the internet and see the type of content that's on the internet, and you think that this is the best stuff to train your models on. You're actually better off filtering out a lot of the data. And it's funny because I was talking to this guy the other day who is in charge of Falcon AI, and his the Abu Dhabi TII created that. And he was telling me that he's like, we have to filter out so much data because it's just a lot of it is not data you'd want in this model. So, when you look at this, you really have to, especially when it's a custom case, when it's a specific case like manufacturing, you want to be looking, you can understand the structure of the model is okay, but the data you want to ingest, you want to make sure that's pretty on point, you
Yes,
know?
exactly. And
Yeah.
you control the data. I mean, the moment you let that data out into the open world, it's gone. You lose your
Yeah.
IP. I don't want to mention the name of the company that got in trouble for doing that, but they thought they could use OpenAI or just the internet for their AI work, and all of their IPs floating out there now.
Yeah, I mean, and it's similar to, when the cloud first came out. People were just putting stuff on the cloud.
Yeah,
Maybe an S3 bucket wasn't secured as well. And it's the same thing right now because people are in such a rush. They're trying to keep up, rightfully so, and they, might not understand all the ramifications, especially if you don't have a lot of the resources and you're not, a company that's been around this. Then you probably don't understand that you shouldn't just ask a question to a publicly available model that's going to look at all your data that you're putting out there.
that's right. I mean, a publicly traded company. I heard about this from a friend of mine. Publicly traded company. Apparently, some employee in the finance department asked ChatGPT to write a document about their $50 billion loss or something, and it was out there before the earnings call. So,
Yeah, and that's why you're seeing. I mean, a lot of companies, including us right now, and in terms of Cisco and in emerging tech where I am, there's a lot of products coming out there that are kind of AI security policy, things around that because we really need to protect this. It's almost like the shadow IT. Going back to what we were saying before, we were shadow IT with cloud providers and cloud services. We're having the same thing now. We have to protect this data from getting out there.
absolutely. I mean, the thing is, when new technologies come out, the fundamentals, yes, it changes, but the core value system around it, in many ways, is consistent, right?
Mhm.
You mentioned security, and you said your background was security and networking. A
Yep.
lot of the things that you use from a security standpoint, and some of the convictions that you had around security for on-prem, carried over to private cloud, then carried over to your public cloud instances, and now it's going to carry over to AI. If anything, it might get a little deeper from an AI perspective because it's not just rule-based access control or role-based access control, but it's also data-based access control and a bunch of other layers beneath that. But the fundamentals still remain, right?
Yeah. So going back a little bit to your solution, how does somebody even start to attack this? So somebody says, I have a solution and I want to integrate an AI pipeline in some way or fashion. And maybe it's multimodal, maybe it has to use RAG or or something like that, or maybe it has to use agents. How do you even start to use your platform to start to think about this stuff?
Well, very simply, I would say just go to clarifai.com and sign up and just get into the platform and play around with it. Right? As soon as you log in, you will see all these data sets. You will see models that are available for you. You can do a quick search on, as you were saying earlier, a speech to text model, right? It's right there. And it'll show you the rankings and everything else as well. And you can use that then to then figure out, what do I do next? Uh, I got the model of choice. What am I supposed to do with this? Is there a data source that I need to connect it with? What's that data source? Okay, let me just connect it with that data source. What else do I need to do? Can I do fine tuning on this? Can I do some pre-training? Can I do some inference training on it? So all of those things are available on the platform today. So uh, I think one of the things we have to do more now is more training, education on what are you looking for. Oftentimes the developer themselves are not sure about what the outcome should look like. So I think that's an area that we can do a better job of providing examples of, here's what a good output looks like, here's what a bad output looks like, here's the reasons why this output is not good. Maybe you didn't use the inference training solution that's available on the platform, or the tuning solution, and so on. So that education is one that we are working on to provide more clarity.
I think that's amazing because one of the things that I talk about, and one of the things I like to talk about on my show is very outcome based.
Yeah.
Because I don't like tech for tech's sake. I like to understand and provide to my audience, what is the purpose of this technology? What are you trying to achieve? And I think one of the things that a lot of tech companies miss from a marketing perspective, or even from providing education perspective, is, okay, yeah, there are a lot of features, but what is that? What's the outcome? Like, why do people want to use this? And I think showing that, and by the way, just the 15, 20 minutes I was at looking at some of the catalog pieces of your solution, there were examples, there were models, there was a catalog library of like things that people have done that I could just use as a starting point if I wanted to. So I thought that was really neat because it makes it a low barrier to entry, and I really think that's what people need to even start to understand this. When you look at, and again, going back to the cloud world, when you look at cloud native, people really didn't start getting into it easily until things like Rancher came out, and that made the world a lot different because it allowed people to ease into these new technologies and really start to consume it in a way that was easier for people, not having to go right to YAML files and right to things like that to start to understand how these things work.
Yeah, and we also have to create a community of people who help each other. I mean, I wish I could say that for the world in general, right? We
Yeah.
help each other out, but for the AI community, uh, there's right and wrong. There's concerns about what's trustworthy and trustable AI and responsible AI and so on. But even within the construct of all of that, it's also a community that has to feed off of each other's goodness,
Yeah.
and that's why we want to expose some of the examples that are working. We encourage people to use their success and help others do it through the platform. So if they're willing to share some of those successes, either as a fully functional AI application or a code set or model that they want other people to use, the platform will allow you to do that. Definitely want to build that community awareness aspect as well. And that's part of the training and education too, right?
Do you see a lot of, I mean, in the industry, do you see people generally going towards that, or do you see people wanting to hold it close to their vest and just say, or is it just a mix?
It depends on the type of industry. Uh, if I go to my previous company, it's a very older industry. Storage backup is not something that's fairly new, but it is absolutely necessary because it's where your data is. It holds the key to your fortress when it comes to data. And that's a very insular sort of a technology area. They don't want to release most of that information. You'll never, I don't think you will see too many open source data storage companies, right? Uh,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, I come from a world like HashiCorp where we benefited from the community contributing back to the technology. It has helped the entire community become better. It helped accelerate the cloud adoption, which has had a lot of positives. And I believe the same thing for AI. And a lot of the folks that I speak to in the AI space are very similar in their assumption that if we all work together, we can make sure AI is responsibly used and can help humanity in many ways, right? And can avoid some of the problems that we could have. So I see a lot of positives from other startup founders in the space. In fact, I meet with a few of them very regularly. We've actually launched at Clarifai, we launched this developer alliance called AI Developer Alliance with a few other like minded partners, about 15 of them right now. And we plan to expand that. And the intent behind that was exactly that. Like, can we all work together? And can we all focus on things that we do really well and help the rest of the community who are trying to get this up? Uh, and you mentioned earlier about the skill shortage. Same thing happened with cloud. There might still
Mhm.
be a skill shortage on the cloud side. We definitely have a skill shortage on the AI side. And so if we can abstract out the programming aspect and make it more intuitive and more operational and more easy with all these technologies coming together, the better it is for the entire industry, right? So I do see that progressing positively.
What type of companies are members of this, or people are members of this kind of loose affiliate, or whatever you want to call it?
In some ways they all have something to do with AI. It could
Okay.
be some aspects of the platform that we today have. It could be a vector database. We have our own vector database, but there might be other vector databases out there that customers prefer. We are absolutely happy to have that as part of our partnership and be part of the ecosystem. At the end of the day, we want to make sure the customer gets what they want, right? There's data labeling companies. We do auto data labeling ourselves, but uh, we could absolutely do with a partner that does that day in day out and does a phenomenal job with it. So I mean, in some, there was someone who actually told me that aren't they competing with you? Maybe yes, they are. But maybe if we are only going for a use case that's centered around data labeling, probably. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to sell the platform that enables everything. From an AI perspective, these are all great ecosystem partners, and together we make the customer's use case come to fruition.
Yeah, it's funny because at the end of the day, we are there are a lot of competitors to what you do when you work at a company. But whenever I go to a KubeCon, and I go to all the KubeCons and take my show there, we're all friends too. So it's not like, yes, we're competitors, but we're all also friends and sharing, not sharing trade secrets or anything, but we're all friends in real life.
Exactly. And if we all start to become insular from a technology perspective and not work with an ecosystem of partners, the loser in the end is a customer, right? And if you believe in a customer centric solution and focus on customers being successful, then you overgrow that mindset.
Well, that's what I think is great about what you guys did, is that you actually took real problems. You said that you've evolved over time, but it's the reason good products actually happen is because usually there's a need that you're banging your head against the wall so many times and you're saying, I think I could do this a little bit better. And that's usually how the best solutions come into play.
That's right. I mean, the challenge that we are seeing today, when we talk to CIOs, less than 1% of the AI applications that are built for enterprises are actually in production. Everything is hitting this false finish line, which is in
Mhm.
prototype phase. And very few actually cross that false finish line into scalable, full fledged deployments. And that's an area that we absolutely want to help enterprises. My rally cry to the engineering team was let's solve for organizational complexity. It's not We start with helping the individual developer, and then we scale into how do we help this solve this problem for 10, 15, 20 developers within an organization, and also the organization at large, right? Whether it's control over who gets access to what type of data, to how much compute is too much compute, before the same problems with cloud around cost and pricing and all that becomes an issue. How much of that needs to be on a GPU versus on a CPU? Does your vector database need to be completely on a GPU, or can it run an optimized performance on a CPU? Depending on the chipset maker, you will get differing answers. But can we quantify that? Can we showcase that to the enterprise customer so they understand exactly what the value is, where things are happening, and what the day two operations look like, so that they can keep that application in production?
Yeah, no, that's great. So on my show, we do this thing. It's called Buzzworthy or Buzzworthless, where I'll give you a couple terms,
Okay.
and usually you can tell me whether they're buzzworthy and buzzworthless. And I just asked a couple sentences on why they're buzzworthy or buzzworthless. So I'm going to do stuff that's relative to what you're doing. So let's say AI in general, is that buzzworthy or buzzworthless at this point?
Definitely buzzworthy. I mean,
Okay.
the reason why you and I are talking about it is because it is buzzworthy. Honestly, the reason I'm working at Clarify is because it is buzzworthy, but also embedded in the fact that it is real. Right? It used to be a fictional thing many years ago. You used to watch it in movies and shows and read about it in books. The GPU advancements have helped make it more operational and usable the last 10 to 15 months. And now it's getting more and more real in terms of its application and use cases. So yes, it is buzzworthy for sure.
And what about generative AI? Is that buzzworthy or buzzworthless?
Well, the question is, well, what should I say? I would probably say it is buzzworthy, but
Okay.
I will caveat that by saying uh, it's not just generative AI; it's also predictive AI. Right? So
Mhm.
predictive AI, in my opinion, is what enterprises are looking for. Generative AI is cool. Predictive AI is more functional.
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, to me, it's funny. I think of generative AI and I think of all the different solutions that people are just connecting it together. So to me, that's getting a little bit more like just part of the noise that's out there. And so to me, that's getting a little bit more buzz worth less. But it really depends on where you are in that spectrum. And I like that analysis of predictive AI. I think that's a great point.
And it also ties back to your first question about AI itself. I think generative AI is what's helping keep AI buzzworthy, right? So I don't want to discount that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we only have a few minutes left. Anything you want to leave people with on the show?
Yeah, I mean, everybody heard about Clarify at this point during the podcast. So I would definitely encourage everyone to go to clarify.com. That's CLARIFAI.com. It's not .ai. And try the platform out. Try it out for yourself. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are extremely responsive. We also have a great new white paper that we launched. It's called Operationalizing Your AI. It talks about what the maturity curve is for AI in an enterprise and how to get from point A to point X, Y, Z, and what are the steps in between. So we would definitely love to help you with whatever challenges you have with AI. So go to clarify.com.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, and maybe we'll have you on again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.